The morning started like any other day in Seoul. Commander Jiho was drinking his coffee at the Seoul Defense Center when the first reports came in. Strange objects were appearing in the sky over major cities around the world. At first, everyone thought they were clouds or maybe some kind of weather phenomenon, but these weren't clouds. They were ships, massive dark vessels that stretched across the sky like floating cities. Jiho watched in horror as the objects completely blocked out the sun over Seoul. The temperature dropped instantly, and the city fell into an unnatural twilight. Dr. Mina was in her laboratory at the Korean Institute when the sirens began wailing. She rushed to the window and saw something that made her blood run cold. The alien ships weren't just floating there. They were positioning themselves with military precision over every major population center on Earth. Within minutes, the attacks began. Brilliant beams of energy shot down from the ships like lightning bolts from an angry god. Jiho watched his communication screens light up with desperate reports from around the globe. Tokyo was the first to fall. The entire city center simply vanished in a flash of white light, leaving behind only a smoking crater where millions of people had lived. Just moments before, New York followed within the hour, then London, then Moscow. The pattern was always the same: no warning, no demands. Just complete and total destruction of humanity's greatest cities. Mina tried to establish contact with the alien vessels, using every frequency and communication method known to science. She sent mathematical sequences, musical patterns, even basic pictographs. The aliens didn't respond to any of it. They simply continued their work of destruction with cold, mechanical efficiency. The world's military forces scrambled to respond. Fighter jets launched from bases around the globe, firing missiles and bullets at the alien ships. The weapons simply bounced off invisible shields or were absorbed by the dark metal hulls. Nothing Earth could throw at these invaders made even the slightest difference. Jiho coordinated the evacuation of Seoul as more alien ships appeared overhead. Millions of people fled the cities, clogging highways and creating chaos everywhere. But there was nowhere to run. The aliens weren't just targeting major cities anymore. They were landing troops and establishing bases on every continent. The alien soldiers moved like machines. They didn't speak or communicate with each other in any way humans could detect. They simply carried out their orders with perfect coordination. Their weapons could cut through steel like paper, and their armor made them nearly invulnerable to human weapons. By the end of the first day, it was clear that this wasn't an invasion in the traditional sense. The aliens weren't trying to conquer Earth or steal its resources. They were systematically exterminating every human being they could find. It was genocide on a planetary scale, carried out with the efficiency of a factory assembly line. Mina realized with growing horror that humanity was facing something they had never encountered before. These weren't conquerors or explorers. They were exterminators, and Earth had become their target. 3 months after the first attack, humanity had learned to live like rats in the shadows. The surface world belonged to the aliens now, but deep underground something remarkable was happening. People who had never met before were working together with a determination that surprised even themselves. Mina had set up her makeshift laboratory in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath what used to be Seoul. The walls were lined with salvaged equipment and alien technology that her team had managed to recover from crash sites. Every piece of alien metal, every broken weapon, every damaged piece of armor was precious. It represented hope that maybe, just maybe, humans could find a way to fight back. General Taeho operated from a network of connected bunkers that stretched across 3 continents. He had been a career military officer before the invasion, but now he found himself commanding an army of teachers, farmers, doctors, and students. Anyone who could hold a weapon or carry a message had become a soldier in this underground war. The communication system they had built was ingenious in its simplicity. Radio signals could be detected by the aliens, so they used old-fashioned methods. Messages traveled through sewer systems, abandoned mine shafts, and forgotten tunnels. Children who knew the underground passages, like the back of their hands, became the most valuable messengers in human history. Suna had been working as an electronics engineer at Samsung before her entire world collapsed. Now she spent her days hunched over alien circuit boards in a cramped bunker, trying to understand technology that seemed to operate on principles that human science barely recognized. Her fingers were constantly stained with strange alien lubricants, and her eyes were red from staring at microscopic components for hours at a time. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. Suna was examining a piece of alien communication equipment when she noticed something odd. Every alien device she had studied seemed to pulse with the same rhythm, like they were all listening to the same heartbeat. She connected her oscilloscope and discovered that all alien technology operated on an identical quantum frequency. This was huge. If every alien weapon, shield, and communication device used the same frequency, then theoretically, that frequency could be disrupted. It would be like finding out that every human heart beat at exactly the same rate, and then figuring out how to stop them all at once. Mina's team worked around the clock to verify Suna's discovery. They tested it on captured alien weapons and watched in amazement as the devices simply shut down when exposed to the right interference pattern. The weapons didn't explode or malfunction dramatically. They just stopped working, as if someone had flipped an off switch. Meanwhile, the aliens continued their systematic destruction of human civilization. They showed no curiosity about human culture, no interest in Earth's resources, and no desire to communicate. They simply moved from city to city, methodically eliminating every trace of human existence they could find. But now, hidden in the darkness beneath the ruins of their world, humanity had found something the aliens didn't expect them to have. They had found hope, and they were preparing to use it. Kyung had always been good at getting into places where he didn't belong. Before the invasion, he had worked as a security consultant, helping companies find weaknesses in their systems. Now those same skills were being used to infiltrate alien facilities, and the stakes couldn't be higher. His team consisted of 12 people, each chosen for their unique abilities. There was Jinwoo, a former circus acrobat who could squeeze through impossibly small spaces. Minji had been a computer programmer who could hack into almost any system. Donghyun was an electrician who understood how to disable security systems without triggering alarms. The mission had taken weeks of planning. They had studied the alien base outside of what used to be Busan for months, learning the patrol patterns and identifying the weakest points in their defenses. The aliens were methodical, but they were also predictable. They followed the same routines every day, like machines programmed to repeat the same tasks. The infiltration happened during a thunderstorm. The heavy rain and lightning would mask any small noises they might make. Kyung led his team through the drainage systems that ran beneath the alien facility. The tunnels were cramped and filled with freezing water, but they provided the perfect cover. Getting inside the main structure was the hardest part. The aliens had sensors that could detect human body heat, but Minji had figured out how to create false readings using modified heating pads. To the alien security systems, the infiltration team looked like maintenance equipment moving through the facility. What they found inside changed everything. The alien facility wasn't just a military base, it was a massive data storage center, filled with information that went back thousands of years. Row after row of crystalline storage devices contained the history of the galaxy, and humanity's place in it was more complicated than anyone had imagined. Kyung's team had exactly 47 minutes before the next security sweep. They downloaded as much information as they could carry, filling portable drives with alien data that would take months to translate. The escape was just as dangerous as the infiltration, but they made it back to the underground tunnels without being detected. Mina spent the next 3 weeks working to decode the alien files. The language was completely unlike anything on Earth, but she had help from linguistics experts who had survived the initial attacks. Slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge from the alien records. Earth wasn't just another planet to these aliens. It had been marked, catalogued, and quarantined by something called the Galactic Council thousands of years ago. Humanity had been identified as a potentially dangerous species, one that needed to be monitored carefully. The shocking revelation was that this wasn't personal. The aliens weren't destroying humanity out of hatred or fear. They were following an automated protocol that had been triggered by humanity's rapid technological advancement. In just a few hundred years, humans had gone from sailing ships to spaceflight. This rate of development had set off alarm bells in some ancient computer system. According to the alien record, species that developed too quickly were considered unstable and dangerous. They had a tendency to become aggressive and spread across the galaxy like a plague. The Galactic Council had apparently dealt with this problem before by implementing cleansing protocols that eliminated emerging civilizations before they could become a threat. The most terrifying part was that the aliens actually believed they were doing the right thing. They saw themselves as protectors of galactic peace, preventing a catastrophe that could destroy countless worlds. From their perspective, the extinction of humanity was a small price to pay for the safety of the entire galaxy. The day of the counterattack began before sunrise. In hidden bunkers across the globe, resistance fighters checked their equipment one final time. They had spent months building Suna's frequency disruptors from scavenged parts and alien technology. Each device was roughly the size of a car battery and could disable alien equipment within a half-kilometer radius. Tai-Ho stood in the main command bunker, staring at a map covered in red pins. Each pin represented an alien installation that needed to be destroyed simultaneously. The timing had to be perfect. If even one alien base detected the attack early, they could warn the others and the entire operation would fail. The first target was the alien facility near what used to be Tokyo. A team of 30 fighters had positioned themselves around the perimeter during the night. At exactly 6 a.m., they activated their frequency disruptors. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive energy shields protecting the base simply vanished, flickering out like a light switch being turned off. Wonho, leading the Tokyo assault team, couldn't believe his eyes. Alien soldiers who had seemed invincible just moments before were suddenly stumbling around in confusion. Their weapons wouldn't fire. Their armor had become dead weight. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had the advantage. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Berlin, Sunmi watched alien aircraft fall from the sky as their engines failed. In Cairo, Jae-hyun led his team through facilities where alien defenders couldn't even call for help because their communication systems had shut down. The frequency disruptors were working better than anyone had dared to hope, but the aliens adapted quickly. Those who survived the initial attacks began retreating to their massive ships in orbit. Tai-Ho watched the tactical displays as alien ground forces abandoned their bases and fled skyward. At first, this seemed like victory. The humans had driven the invaders off the planet's surface. The celebration was short-lived. Jiho was monitoring alien communications from his position in Seoul when he detected something that made his blood run cold. The alien ships in orbit were powering up weapons that had never been used before. These weren't the surgical energy beams that had destroyed individual cities. These were planet killers designed to sterilize entire worlds. The mathematics were terrifying. Jiho calculated that the aliens had enough firepower to turn Earth's entire surface into molten rock. They were preparing to eliminate not just humanity, but every living thing on the planet. Trees, animals, bacteria, everything would be destroyed, to ensure that no trace of Earth's dangerous species could ever spread to the stars. The counterattack had succeeded beyond all expectations, but it had also sealed humanity's fate. By proving that humans could fight back and win, the resistance had convinced the aliens that Earth was too dangerous to leave intact. The Galactic Council's protocols were clear. If a quarantined species showed signs of advanced military capability, the entire planet had to be cleansed. Tai-Ho realized they had 12 hours before the orbital bombardment began. 12 hours to find a solution, or humanity would join the countless other species that had been eliminated by the galaxy's self-appointed protectors. The victory had bought them time, but it might have also ensured their complete destruction. Time was running out. In the underground command center, everyone could feel the weight of the countdown pressing down on them. 11 hours and 37 minutes until the alien ships would turn Earth into a dead rock floating in space. The room was filled with desperate voices suggesting impossible plans, but none of them had a realistic chance of success. That's when Mina stood up and asked for silence. Her idea was so crazy that at first Nobody wanted to listen. She wanted to use the captured alien shuttles to fly directly into the enemy flagship. Not to destroy it, but to get inside and somehow turn the aliens' own weapons against them. Kyung looked at the technical specifications they had gathered about the massive ship hovering above Earth. It was over 20 kilometers long and protected by shields that could deflect nuclear weapons. Getting inside would require flying through a defensive grid that had already destroyed dozens of human aircraft. But Mina had noticed something important in the alien data they had recovered. The flagship's shields were designed to keep threats out, not to prevent their own ships from returning. If they could make the captured shuttles appear to be legitimate alien craft, they might be able to slip through the defenses undetected. The plan required incredible precision. Hyunwoo, their best pilot, would have to fly the alien shuttle using controls designed for non-human hands. The navigation systems displayed information in symbols that looked more like mathematical equations than flight instruments. One wrong move, and they would be vaporized by the flagship's defensive weapons. The infiltration team consisted of only 6 people. They couldn't risk sending more because the alien shuttle had limited space, and any additional weight might affect its performance. Besides Kyung and Mina, the team included Suna with her frequency disruptor equipment, Hyunwoo as the pilot, and 2 combat specialists named Seojun and Yuna. The flight to the flagship took 43 minutes. Every second felt like an hour as they approached the massive alien vessel. The ship was so large that it blocked out a significant portion of the sky. Its surface was covered with weapon systems that could eliminate entire cities, and somewhere, deep inside, the aliens were preparing to use those weapons on Earth. Getting through the shields was the easy part. The real challenge began once they were inside the ship itself. The corridors were designed for beings that were taller and broader than humans. The gravity was slightly different, making every step feel awkward and unnatural. Strange sounds echoed through the metal passages, and the air had a sharp chemical smell that made their eyes water. What they discovered inside changed everything they thought they knew about their enemies. The aliens weren't entirely biological creatures. They were cyborgs, beings that had been surgically modified with the same quantum technology that powered their weapons and ships. Metal implants were fused directly into their flesh, and their brains were connected to computer systems through cables that ran along their spines. Suna realized the implications immediately. If the aliens were partially technological, then the frequency disruptors wouldn't just disable their equipment. The weapons would affect the aliens themselves, disrupting the technological components that had been integrated into their bodies. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had found a way to hurt their enemies directly. The deeper they went into the flagship, the stranger things became. Mina noticed that the ship's design wasn't purely functional. There were decorative elements carved into the walls, artistic patterns that served no practical purpose. This was odd because everything else about the aliens seemed coldly efficient. Why would a species focused only on destruction care about art? The answer came when they reached the ship's central data core. Unlike the crystalline storage devices they had seen before, this chamber contained something that looked almost organic. Massive, brain-like structures were suspended in glowing fluid, connected by thousands of cables to the ship's computer systems. The sight was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. Mina began downloading information from the central database while Suna set up her frequency disruptor. The files that appeared on her portable screen made her hands shake. These weren't just military records or tactical information. They were memories. Billions of individual memories that had been stored and suppressed for thousands of years. The truth was more horrible than anything they had imagined. The Kethmori hadn't always been the cold, mechanical killers that had invaded Earth. Once they had been a species very much like humanity. They had built cities, created art, raised families, and dreamed of exploring the stars. Their planet had been filled with diverse cultures, different languages, and unique traditions. But their rapid technological development had triggered the same protocol that now threatened Earth. The Galactic Council had marked them as dangerous and sent in forces to eliminate their civilization. However, instead of completely destroying the Kethmori, the Council had decided to try something different. They would turn the survivors into tools. The process had been methodical and cruel. Young Kethmori were taken from their families and subjected to surgical procedures that replaced portions of their brains with computer implants. Their memories were suppressed, their emotions dulled, and their natural instincts overwritten with programmed directives. They became the perfect enforcers, carrying out the Council's will without question or hesitation. As Suna activated her frequency disruptor, something unexpected happened. The brain-like structures in the chamber began to pulse with different rhythms. Cables sparked and disconnected. The suppressed memories that had been locked away for millennia suddenly began to surface. The ship's commander, who had been known only as Unit Prime 7, began to remember her real name, Hyun. She remembered playing as a child in gardens that no longer existed on a world that had been reduced to ash. She remembered her mother's voice singing lullabies in a language that had been forbidden for thousands of years. The pain of remembering was overwhelming. Hyun collapsed to her knees as decades of suppressed emotions flooded back. She remembered the day the enforcers had come to her world. She remembered watching her parents die. She remembered the surgery that had turned her into a monster, and all the innocent species she had helped destroy since then. For the first time in millennia, tears ran down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness alone. They were tears of rage. The Galactic Council hadn't just destroyed her people, they had turned the survivors into weapons against others who were guilty of nothing more than the desire to grow and learn. Mina realized they weren't fighting against evil aliens. They were fighting against victims who had been forced to become killers, and somewhere in the depths of space, the real enemy was still pulling the strings. The change started slowly, like ripples spreading across a still pond. When Hyun's memories returned, they didn't stay contained within her own mind. The Kethmori fleet was connected through a complex network of shared consciousness, designed to make them more efficient as a fighting force. But now, that same network was carrying something the Galactic Council had never intended: the truth in Bay. The command bunker on Earth, Taiho watched his monitoring screens with growing amazement. The alien fleet, which had maintained perfect formation for months, was beginning to break apart. Ships were changing course without apparent reason. Some were powering down their weapons, while others were charging them up and pointing them at their own allies. Aboard the flagship, Mina could hear sounds echoing through the corridors that she had never heard from the aliens before. Voices raised in what sounded like arguments, mechanical footsteps running in different directions. The cold, silent efficiency that had defined the Kethmori was cracking apart. The awakening wasn't happening to everyone at the same rate. Some of the cyborgs, like Hyun, had retained more of their original biological components and were able to access their suppressed memories more easily. Others had been so heavily modified that the programming ran deeper than their remaining organic tissue. Daiho was one of the first to remember. He had been a teacher on the Kethmori homeworld, helping children learn about art and literature. The memory of his students' faces hit him like a physical blow. For centuries, he had been destroying worlds that contained children just like the ones he had once protected. The guilt was almost unbearable, but Velkis, another commander in the fleet, fought against the returning memories. She had been modified so extensively that the computer implants in her brain actively resisted the awakening process. To her, the memories felt like a virus attacking her system. She rallied others like herself, convincing them that the humans had infected them with some kind of psychological weapon. The split in the fleet became obvious when the first shots were fired. It wasn't humans attacking aliens anymore. It was Kethmori fighting against Kethmori, brother against sister, the awakened against the enslaved. Taiho coordinated with resistance cells around the globe as they watched the battle unfold above their heads. Massive energy beams crossed space between the alien ships. Explosions lit up the night sky as vessels that had worked together for millennia turned their weapons on each other. The awakened Kethmori tried to reach their enslaved comrades through their shared communication network. They broadcast memories of their homeworld, images of families and friends who had been lost. They sent recordings of music and poetry from their destroyed civilization. hoping to trigger recognition in minds that had been programmed to forget. But the enslaved fought back with equal determination. They saw the memories as weakness, the emotions as corruption. They had been built to serve the Galactic Council's purpose, and that programming ran deeper than flesh and blood. To them, the awakened had become infected, diseased, and needed to be eliminated before the corruption could spread further. The battle above Earth became more than just a fight for control of the fleet. It became a struggle for the soul of an entire species, with some fighting to reclaim their stolen identity, while others clung to the only purpose they had known for thousands of years. The moment when Hyun first spoke directly to the human resistance was one that nobody would ever forget. Her voice came through the communication systems with a strange mixture of mechanical precision and genuine emotion. She spoke in broken English, words that seemed to cause her physical pain as she fought against her programming to say them. Humans. I remember now, we were like you once. Help us fight the real enemy. In the command bunker, Taiho made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He opened a direct communication channel with the awakened Keth Mori and began coordinating joint operations. The species that had been trying to exterminate humanity was now asking for help in breaking free from their own chains. Mina worked closely with Hyun and the other awakened commanders to understand the full scope of what they were facing. The Galactic Council's empire wasn't built on conquest in the traditional sense. It was built on a cycle of turning victims into perpetrators. Every species that showed too much potential was either destroyed or converted into enforcers who would destroy the next emerging civilization. The plan that emerged was audacious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. Soon as frequency disruptor technology could be amplified using the Keth Mori fleet's own communication arrays. Instead of affecting just a few ships, they could broadcast the liberation frequency to every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. There were dozens of enslaved species out there, all turned into cyborg enforcers like the Keth Mori. The Zephyrians, who had once been master architects before being forced to destroy beautiful cities. The Volthari, former explorers who now hunted down other spacefaring species. The Nexul, who had been philosophers and poets before their minds, were rewired for warfare. But first, they had to deal with the orbital defense platforms that the enslaved Keth Mori had activated. These ancient weapons systems had been placed around Earth long ago, hidden and waiting for the day when humanity would need to be eliminated. Each platform had enough firepower to crack continents, and there were 12 of them positioned around the planet. Kyung found himself in the surreal position of leading joint strike teams that included both human resistance fighters and awakened Keth Mori soldiers. The aliens who had been trying to kill him just days earlier were now fighting alongside him against their own enslaved brothers and sisters. The battle for the orbital platforms was unlike anything in human history. Jiho coordinated attacks that used human cunning combined with alien technology. Resistance fighters rode in Keth Mori assault craft, while awakened aliens used human-designed frequency weapons to disable the platform's defenses. Each platform that fell was a victory not just for Earth, but for every species that had suffered under the Galactic Council's rule. The awakened Keth Mori fought with a fury that came from thousands of years of suppressed anger. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for redemption. As the last orbital platform was destroyed, Suna made the final connections to the galaxy-wide broadcast system. The liberation frequency would reach every enslaved species simultaneously, potentially freeing millions of beings who had been turned into unwilling servants of oppression. The battle had become something greater than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about saving Earth anymore. It was about starting a revolution that would span the entire galaxy. The moment the frequency wave launched into space, everyone on Earth could feel that something fundamental had changed. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but monitoring stations around the globe detected the massive energy pulse as it expanded outward at the speed of light. This wasn't just a signal anymore. It was a message of freedom being carried to every corner of the galaxy. Suna watched the readouts from her makeshift control center, tears streaming down her face. The broadcast was stronger than anything they had dared to hope for. The Awakened. Keth Mori had amplified the signal using their entire fleet's communication array. Every enslaved species within 10,000 light-years would receive the liberation frequency within hours. But the success came with an immediate price. Deep space monitoring stations detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. Massive ships were moving toward Earth from the galactic core. The real Galactic Council forces were coming, and their fleet made the Kethemori invasion look like a small skirmish by comparison. Hyun made the hardest decision of her newly reclaimed life. Standing on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by awakened Kethemori, who were still struggling with their recovered memories, she gave the order that would save Earth but doom her people to eternal exile. "We cannot stay," she announced through the fleet's communication system. "If we remain, here the Council will destroy this world to punish both humans and us. We must disappear before they arrive." The quantum phase drives had been designed as a last resort, a way for Kethemori fleets to escape if they ever encountered something they couldn't defeat. The technology would transport the entire fleet to a dimension that existed parallel to normal space, where they could travel vast distances without being detected. Jiho watched from his monitoring station as the alien ships began to shimmer and fade. One by one, the massive vessels that had brought terror to Earth just months earlier were vanishing like ghosts. The awakened Kethemori were keeping their promise to leave, but they were also taking with them the only allies humanity had ever found among the stars. Before the last ship disappeared, Hyun sent one final message to Earth. Her voice carried a mixture of hope and sadness that touched everyone who heard it. "We go now to find others like us. The galaxy is full of enslaved species, and they will all hear what happened here. Earth has shown us that freedom is possible. We will not forget this gift." The phase transition was complete within minutes. Where once a fleet of city-sized ships had filled the sky, there was now only empty space and the distant stars. The Kethemori had vanished without leaving so much as a trace of debris behind. Mina stood in what had once been downtown Seoul, looking up at the clear night sky. The city around her was still in ruins, and it would take decades to rebuild what had been lost. But something had changed in humanity's relationship with the universe. They were no longer alone, and they were no longer unknown. The Galactic Council would come eventually. Earth was now marked as a dangerous world, one that had corrupted an entire enforcement fleet and sparked rebellion across the galaxy. But humanity had also gained something invaluable: allies among the stars and the knowledge that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds might seem.